Good morning, everybody. It's the morning of July 29th, 2021. What a start to the summer it's been, am I right? Welcome to another installment of KETIV's Autodesk Virtual Academy. We have a very special guest and topic for you guys here today. I could say this guy that we're about to put on, our special guest, he's a 10-year plus veteran of the industry. He's been in oil and gas. Been in building. He's been in mechanical, dude. This is my go-to guy for tube and pipe, lay and pipe, frame generator. I really ask him all the questions I possibly can. So if you guys could all give our guy, Jeff Perez, a nice round of applause over here.
Thank you, Adam. That's quite the
There you go.
introduction.
Thanks for being
I
on,
feel
Jeff.
slightly
Thanks for
popular
being
right now.
on. Yeah, I got in other news, I did get a soundboard for this particular webinar, so I hope you look forward to some more sounds coming up. Thanks again for being on, Jeff. Yeah, what do you got for us today, man?
So for today, we are going to be going into some of the native export abilities that we do have inside of Inventor. So we'll be able to export now direct Revit files from Inventor now. So we haven't been able to do that before. We saw some limitations in some older versions of Inventor, where now we have the ability to natively export out Revit project files. So we'll be diving into that kind of workflow today and answering some of the challenges that some of our customers are seeing from a day-to-day basis, even before 2022 came out. So we'll look to address some of that.
I think that should be it. But yeah, Jeff, take it away. Tell me more about what Revit and Inventor's got going on this year.
Great. Let me turn off my camera just so this is out of the way really quick. Hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. So for today's agenda, we're going to go through a quick introduction about myself. We'll talk about some of the common manufacturing and building obstacles and challenges that some industrial manufacturers or machinery manufacturers are seeing when they're coordinating models between Revit disciplines and even building consultants, and how Autodesk looked to address some of these challenges with the release of the 2022 product set. After that, we'll dive into some additional resources, and then we'll end today's AVA session with a quick round of question and answering. So I'm sure we're going to have quite a bit here. Okay. So a little bit about myself. I know Adam kind of covered this earlier with my introduction, but I am a customer success manager here at KETIV Technologies. I originally came on KETIV as an application engineer where I worked with many of you. I do see quite a bit of familiar names here through the KETIV support channel. So I may have picked up some support cases through you. I am also an Autodesk certified Inventor professional instructor as well. As Adam mentioned, I do have about 10 years experience inside the mechanical design and engineering, specifically in oil and gas, where we package or we provide a gas compressor skid package systems. So I leverage a lot of tools within AutoCAD, AutoCAD P&ID, AutoCAD Plan 3D, Inventor, and Vault. So everything that you're probably dealing with from the product design and manufacturing collection. I then left that industry and moved more into an architectural engineering and construction industry. So I use a lot of those AEC tools that you see like AutoCAD MEP, Revit, Navisworks, and BIM 360. So I do have quite a bit of understanding of how these different tool sets are communicating between each other and not. So we're seeing quite a bit of this happening now from a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about some common manufacturing and building obstacles before we kind of get into what's been new into 2022. So you may be a manufacturer, and I do have a couple of customers myself that are manufacturers of a building product or maybe manufacturers of a unique piece of machinery that they need to provide coordinated models, that they need to maybe provide family models from Inventor that have a lot of intricacy in terms of its design, in terms of internal components that maybe as from an architectural standpoint doesn't quite need to see that amount of detail inside of it. They really, from an architectural and from a building manufacturer, they really just need the models for more of a coordination purpose or to take up space limitations inside of a building to understand that, hey, you're going to have this piece of industrial machinery here that we need to account for inside of the building. We are seeing quite a bit of our customers as well that are multi-diverse and have fundamentals that where they create factories for their own internal use, and they also fabricate machinery. So coordinating those models used to be a bit of a hassle. It required them to use functionality like shrink wrap inside of Inventor, producing these dumbed down, simplified models and sending these one-off items from Inventor into the architectural building, and then have the architect place them and try to drive the understanding of where that model is going to lay within the building itself. What we saw is there's a lot of clashes. There's a lot of size constraints happening within the building that wasn't truly accounted for with the prior releases of Inventor and Revit. It required the engineering team to send out markups, maybe snapshots of where clashes could be happening, whether some building consultants are using Navisworks to bring in all these different engineering files to have this truly one source of truth for your building information model. So there was quite a bit of back and forth happening between the two. What Autodesk did in 2021 is they did the first step of this in establishing a true associative link between Revit and Inventor. So if you're not familiar with Inventor 2021, Autodesk used its AnyCAD functionality to allow you to natively bring in a Revit file into Inventor. And what I mean by natively is as an architect is updating the model as they're continuing the building design processes, you would see these updates change automatically on the inventor perspective from a manufacturer or industrial perspective. Even custom fabricators were being able to leverage this information right away. If you're making maybe a custom staircase or even an elevator shaft, they would be able to see these happen in real time. What also was there previously in the 2021 releases and beyond was, and before that, was the ability to export out native authoring using the BIM content export, where you'd be able to export out RFA families or export out IFC families or .adsk file types, depending on what your consultant needed from the manufacturer perspective. What Autodesk is trying to do in Autodesk has done in 2022 is they're really closing the gap between these two. Is they have this true bi-directional associativity happening between Revit and Inventor. Where I did mention Revit was able to be brought into Inventor previously, but now in Inventor, now you can natively export out a true Revit project file. And then that project file can then be brought into the building manufacturer or into the architectural standpoint as a true Revit link to create a truly coordinated model between the two and understand, hey, I have this manufacturing model or this piece of industrial equipment. I can see where it's going to lay within the building. I can see if it may clash with any subdisciplines that I'm working with, such as electrical perspective or a HVAC unit or even plumbing. You'll be able to see those clashes happen within the Revit side of things. But what Autodesk has also done, and if you're leveraging model states now in 2022, it just further amplifies the simplification process that you're dealing with inside of Inventor. So if you leverage model states, you'll be able to quickly use those model states to further simplify the model that you're outputting out and providing to your architectural needs or the building information model itself. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll jump into a workflow overview. We'll first tackle the workflow from a coordination model perspective. Whether you're a manufacturer or again an industrial equipment manufacturer that you need to share some of these models with some of these outside disciplines. We'll tackle this portion first, and then we'll go with creating a independent RFA family file and show you how you can provide those to your architects so that they can bring these in as placeholders or to take up space within the building model for coordination purposes itself. All right. So we'll dive into Revit really quick. And I do have this building. What we'll see inside of this building is we'll have this manufactured type of layout happening inside of here, where there's going to be, well, we'll end up seeing inside of Inventor is a piece of industrial equipment that exists in here. We'll also see some some human representations inside of the vendor side of things. But from a Revit perspective and from a manufacturing perspective, the first step of having this coordinated model is requesting a unique view representation, or a, what Revit calls it, is a 3D view of the area that the manufacturer is going to be working in. Okay. Now, the architect's going to have to kind of segment where you're going to be working in and create your own unique 3D view to provide to the manufacturer itself. So the way they'll want to do this, and again, you could have an internal team that also does the factory design using Revit, but you're going to have to request them to create you a unique 3D view. So we'll just go through this process here and create a new 3D view. And just click that home view there. And then just so you could be able to see this a little bit visually better, we'll put this as shaded. And then I'll create a quick little section box so that you could see that we could truly define the area that we're going to be working in. So you could just section around where the building you're going to be in, the portion of the building that you're going to be working in. So if you were going to be, for instance, maybe an air handling, maybe you're going to be designing a custom air handling unit that's going to be within the roof of this design here, we can then kind of segment just down to the roof that we need to see. So we could go up, oh, that was a little too much there. Go up to the roof like that. And then essentially we just set up our portion of the building that we're, of this view that we're going to be bringing into Inventor. Okay. Now I've already gone through ahead inside this Revit model, and I've created a production B coordination view. Now this view here is going to be used, and if you haven't used this already inside of Inventor 2021, you'll see how we'll use the any CAD functionality inside of Inventor to establish this associative link when bringing in this model into Inventor. Okay. So we'll go back into Inventor really quick. And inside of Inventor, what we'll do first here is inside of this assembly here, we'll go and place an imported CAD file. Now let's find your Revit file that you've been provided. And again, you could share files, whether they're BIM 360, or if you're using SharePoint or just simple email. However you're accessing and communicating and collaborating externally or internally, once you get that file, you're just going to select it and click open. Now, if you are familiar with this from 2021, you do have a couple different options here in terms of how you want this model to be brought in. You could either have this as a reference model, or you can convert the file to be an assembly file. In this purpose, we want this to be referenced because we want to see the associative changes happening from the architectural standpoint to come across to the Inventor side of things. So we'll wait for this to finish loading, and we should see a little preview. Okay. Now, Inventor understands that there is some 3D views that we set up front. Okay. So I have a couple 3D views here. And what I'm going to do is select that 3D view that I asked the architect to define for me, my working area of where I'm going to start creating my models in, my manufacturing models. So we'll select my production B coordination model. Okay. Now in 2021, there wasn't the ability to create categories. And I think this may have gotten added in a later release of 2021, some point update. But in 2022 now, you have the ability to kind of filter off unique Revit categories now, whether you want to turn off, for an example, maybe some air terminals or even the ductwork, you can. So you could kind of really go down and turn off some of these Revit elements from being loaded into your Inventor assembly itself. But I'm okay with this. We'll just click OK. Now, what you'll get here is this warning here. And this is an Autodesk warning letting you know that you could get a performance hit depending on how big of a model you're loading into Inventor from Revit. This is where it really becomes a benefit to, as I was saying with that 3D view that you have set up, have it really kind of segment down to the area of work that you need to work in within the building itself. That way you don't get too much of a performance hit. Now I've loaded in models that are even larger than 2,000 elements and didn't see much of a problem there. So we'll just click yes. But you could also go through a prompt, and if you just want to ignore this, you could just have this message never show up again. So we'll just click OK. So now what Inventor is doing now, it's using its AnyCAD functionality to read this file, translate it, so that you could begin creating some designs directly off of this building model. Now, another thing I do want to mention as well is if you're getting some older versions of Revit files, maybe you're getting previous versions in 2022, what Inventor does, it uses Revit in the back end to upgrade those models to the 2022 version so that it could be properly read inside of Inventor. So if you got a Revit file that was created in 2018, when we're importing it into Inventor, it will upgrade it using Revit to the 2022 release. Okay. And then once it's done loading, we should get an instance of that created 3D view attached to our cursor here. Let's wait for it to finish kind of loading here. It's almost done. And there we go. Here's that instance view that we created inside of Revit. So now, because we want to leverage the two coordinate systems together, we want our models to lay in the correct positioning. We're just going to place this model grounded at origin. So we're placing this specific instance grounded at origin to retain the origin locations or the UCS system between Inventor and Revit. So now that I'm happy with that being placed in here, I'll just click escape. Okay. So we could see that there's that coordination view that I created inside of Revit be brought into Inventor. So what you can do as a manufacturer or as a industrial manufacturer, you can then begin in creating some of Inventor's functionality where you create components directly on top of this Inventor or directly on top of this Revit model here. And then what you'll end up seeing is, as an example here, is if I created a model on this wall, for instance, I can then use Inventor's projections. I could establish relationships to a wall or to a window. So as I create these and develop my initial model here, as an architect adjusts and changes of room parameters, room sizing, you'll see that relationship update automatically within the Inventor side of things. Now, to kind of speed up this process, as I've already placed some equipment, I've placed some machinery, I've placed some dummy models of humans in here as well to kind of give a true representation of a factory that's going to be laid out inside of Inventor here. So I'll switch to this default view really quick, just to kind of show you this. Okay. And what we're seeing here is we have some machinery here. Right, and here's my dummy models I was mentioning. And you can kind of see that there is some detail within all this equipment, right? And as I'm panning over here, what I'm noticing right away is I have this clash that's happening with this crane. Okay, so hopefully you can kind of see this clash happening with this crane and this piece of mechanical ductwork right here. Now, maybe during this design phase or during this initial process with coordinating with the architect, it's been determined that, hey, the manufacturer is correct in terms of its placement. It's going to really require the duct or the mechanical firm to adjust and move that duct work so that we're not having a clash with this crane itself here. Okay, so what we're going to want to do from a manufacturer, from the inventor perspective, is provide a coordination Revit model that we could share with these sub-disciplines, internal or external, that we're working with. So we'll go through the process of creating this Revit coordination model. Okay, now what I've done already is I've created a representation that is a Revit export. And inside of this Revit export, I've already gone through and I've turned off humans. I've turned off any other pieces of machinery that I probably don't need to incorporate inside of this exported coordinated model that we're going to be providing to this subdiscipline here. But what I'm going to do a little bit more is I'm going to turn off this building, okay? Because I just want to provide. I'm going to right click here and I'm going to turn off the visibility here. I just want to provide my industrial equipment or my piece of machinery here for coordination purposes. You can kind of see all we have left is the the assemblies and the part models that I have inside of Inventor. Now, what we can do is we'll go into the simplification tool here, and we'll have this load. And hopefully some of you are aware or maybe have used the Simplify tool before. I'm not going to go into in depth on how this function, how all these different tools and functionality work. I would recommend taking a look at my colleague Justin's Chow's. He did like a 3-part series on AVA with creating simplification models, using shrink wrap to really understand how all these work. But inside of here, what we'll see is under this output tab here is now we have the ability to output directly to a RVT file, which is a Revit project file. Where before in previous releases, you really just had the ability to create a derived part or a substitution part. But what we want to do is provide a Revit coordination model. I can then define a name of this model, and I'll just let it utilize this generated name here, which is a start simplified model. You can then define a location of where you want this model to be saved, and then you could also define a BOM structure. And what this BOM structure is going to allow you to do is in Revit, oftentimes a lot of this machinery and a lot of this industrial equipment that you're coordinated with has to be scheduled. It needs to be accounted for inside of the Revit model. So if you have this set to all in one element, what I'm telling when I output this RVT file, once it gets linked into Revit, when I schedule this particular Revit file, it's going to schedule everything as one item. But what we probably are going to really want to do is schedule everything at the top level so that each subassembly inside of Inventor could be its own unique scheduled item. Okay. Now you could also, maybe you're in the very beginning stages of coordinating your industrial model or these pieces of machinery that we have here. You could create this all as one envelope just to kind of define the area that you're going to be kind of define and take up the area that is going to be taken inside of the building. Or you can go through and leverage, maybe you want each model to just take up its own representation as its own top level of an envelope. So you can see each model here is just kind of defining and taking up that space. But in this cases, I don't want to do envelopes here. What I'm not going to do either is I'm not going to remove the features because this will take some time. If I go through and try to remove all the internal features and fill up voids and remove the details that we've seen inside of Inventor. What I've done beforehand here is in each of these components, I've created a medium style model state. Okay. Now that medium model state already is simplified. Okay. So, and I could associate that model state directly inside of my simplify tool here. And I have this model state at this top level of my assembly here. So you can see that there's this medium model state. I've already gone through and associated this medium model state across all the sub-assemblies and components that I have inside of this Inventor. So we'll set it to that medium model state here. And what we should see is some of these details start to get removed.
And then out of curiosity, Jeff, this model state and simplification stuff, it seems really similar to like level of details and stuff like that. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. Model states were meant to take, what you're not seeing anymore in 2022 is that level of detail functionality. That's where model states completely took over in 2022, and it pretty much mimics that, but I think it's a lot better now. There's a lot more that you can do with model states, and if you haven't seen any of those, we've done several APAs on those. I would recommend taking a look at how model states do work at them.
I hope you have some links at the end of the presentation for us, man. Yeah, right on.
Okay, so now we've associated this assembly, this top level of this assembly with this unique model state that I've defined up front. And again, if you have any other positional representations, you can associate with that too. But what I want to do before I click OK here is make sure I have enable updating turned on as well. Okay, this is what's going to show coming back into Inventor that there is an update from the Revit perspective. So if a Revit model changes, you'll see those updates come through on the Inventor side. And we'll just click OK. So what Inventor is going to be doing now, it's going to be using Revit to create this exported model. And then inside of our assembly tree here, right above model states here, we should see a new folder get created called Revit Exports. And this is essentially where it's going to show you where all your different Revit exports are going to live. And we'll wait for this to kind of finish populating.
And I don't know if you touched on it earlier, Jeff, but if I wanted to edit the original import that I did, maybe take a few layers and items off, could I still do that as well?
You definitely can. You could always have the ability to update and remove some of the Revit families or the Revit categories. And what Revit calls them are elements inside of that imported model. So you could always go back and edit those, and I'll touch on that right after this model's finished exporting, just so you could kind of see that you could always go back and update what you're bringing into the Inventor assembly, as well as update this exported Revit file too. So we'll show both of those things right now.
It's really
So you could,
bi-directional, isn't it? Wow.
so we get this little prompt saying that, okay, that the Revit file was created. Now we'll just confirm this. As I mentioned, we should see a Revit export folder up here. And there it is. There's that file name that I determined. And as Adam was kind of asking, can we ever go back to that imported Revit file and update some of the categories that are being brought in? We can. We're just going to select that file that we brought in. We can right click it, and then we could edit the import, and you'll go right back into your any CAD import. And then you could deselect or reselect any categories that you may have turned off. Or you can even reassociate it with another view that you may have been created. Okay, so you could always go back and edit these. And the same thing with this export now. So maybe as I am creating and continuing this design, I may have added some other pieces of machinery or other pieces of equipment inside of here. I could right click this export here, and I could update it so it could incorporate that with my exported model. Or maybe I want to further simplify this even further. I want to maybe remove some more details here. I could edit this simplify here directly to that export, and you'll go right back into your simplification panel right here. So you could do some more removal of features. You could, take off components by size if you want. However you want to provide this coordinated model, you could always go back and edit it, and it will live within your within your model tree here. Okay. Now, I do want to touch on another way to create another Revit export of a RVT file. Is we saw that we went through the Simplify tool here. You could always go directly into the file, export, and then export directly to the Revit project itself. The one difference here, though, is notice under the output here, it's grayed out. And that's because we already upfront defined what export type I want to export to. Okay, so we could do it that way as well. I'm going to do one more, and I'm going to show you really quick. I'm going to turn on the building this time. So I'm going to turn back on the visibility. Just going V for visibility. Sorry if you're not seeing that. So I'm turning back on that visibility, and we will do one more export really quick. And I'm going to do it under my export tool here. And then make sure it's on there, my medium Revit export. And then I'm going to just give this a quick new name. BLD to include the building into it, and we'll click OK. We're just doing one more export. Now, as this is exporting, once this file has been exported, we can always go into our project file location inside of Inventor to review and make sure that the Revit file did get created. And that's what I'll do here really quick. Is I should just go into my data set here. Wait for that to load. And I should see that there's my simplified model there. And then once this second model is finished, I should see my second simplified building model there as well. Okay, so I'm seeing that it's creating an XML file, and I already see the building one is getting created. And once this one's done, we should see a second file there. And then once you've established that coordination model, then you could go through your functionality with sharing this file out to your architect, whether you're using Vault or BIM 360 or any other tool set that you have for sharing these data sets across some of these consultants that you're working with. And we'll click OK. So now from a manufacturing perspective, I shared this model. I've provided this exported simplified model to my architect. What the architect's going to want to do, or in this case, because I'm clashing with a mechanical consultant for this ductwork here, they're going to want to insert this Revit file into their project. Okay, so we'll switch back into Revit to mimic what that process would look like. Okay. So what I'll do here is I'll switch into this different, I have another 3D view here. And what the mechanical consultant's going to do here, let me close out of these really quick, is they're going to link in that Revit file that you created, that you provided to them for your coordination purposes. So I'm going to find that Start Simplify, and I'll click Open. Now, one thing I would recommend up front is understanding what origin or what position was defined by the architect, because you are going to want these to match to make sure that your model lines up properly with the building. Okay, in this case, I know it's origin to origin. I'll click Open. And we can see right away, there's my crane here. It's clashing through this ductwork. So what the mechanical consultant is going to need to do is adjust and move this piece of ductwork here. So they could go through one of their floor plans that they have set up here. And you can see I have this floor plan. And what I'll do is I'll split this view so you can kind of see this. And I'm going to select this crane right here, this link that let's select this link, this crane link that I have here that we exported out from Inventor, just to kind of highlight where it is in terms of the floor plan. And here's a crane there. Now, what I'm going to do in terms of removing this clash so I could truly have this coordinated model is I'm going to move this piece of ductwork here. Okay, so we'll select this piece of duct. I'm going to move it away. And I could use my arrow keys left or right to move it. Or if you have a true value, which I have a little note here of the value I want to move it to, I'm going to move it to away 3,000 millimeters to clear that clash. Okay, so now it's not clashing there anymore. Okay. And I'm seeing that here now. So now that ductwork is now moved, it's cleared. What I'll do now inside of Revit is I'll click Save. So we've cleared it. The mechanical firm has determined that, okay, the clash is no longer there. They're going to save that file. And because we have this exact file brought into Inventor, what's going to happen now when I go switch back into Inventor now is we should see an update icon show up there. And there it is. So if you're familiar with updating assemblies, it's that native associativity happening between Inventor and Revit now. So what I'll do here is I'll switch back to my default view. And then I'll click Update. And we'll wait for this to quickly process, and we should see that piece of duct move away from this crane that we have here.
I'm curious too, Jeff, because when you first brought in this model, it was obvious the crane was interfering with that beam originally, right? Does that mean I'm going to be using Inventor for clash detection, like in this kind of workflow now?
Probably not, Adam. And that's a great point. What you'll typically kind of see for clash detection is clashes are truly done within a Navisworks platform, Navisworks managed typically, or even BIM 360, depending on how you're hosting models. That's really going to be the main point for understanding and doing a full building information model, having a complete understanding that you're having a clash-free model as well. That's really where that tool kind of lays in. But here, it's going to be leveraged for coordination purposes and make sure that, you know, we're doing our due diligence up front to ensure that there is no clashes happening between your design intent and the building itself.
I see. I see. Okay. Thank you.
So now that we cleared this clash, right, I can see that the crane is clear and I've already established a relationship here. So I'm just going to drive this and we could make sure and see that this crane is clearing from that piece of duct. Right. So now You could truly see now between Inventor and Revit that there is this true bidirectional associativity happening between Inventor and Revit now. So whether you're a manufacturer or whether you're working with an architectural consultant, you could retain these relationships together between the two different platforms. Now, I did kind of touch on RFA families in, I believe, in last year's video that I did in 2021 for creating RFA files. So we'll touch on that really quick too. And we get questions often from a lot of our customers. Hey, I need to provide a design file of my manufactured equipment that may be a off-the-shelf item. It may be a stock component that you deliver and that you produce. Maybe you want to develop a library of these family files. It's going to take you to one, you're going to have to simplify the model, and then two, you'll have to go through the BIM content environment to create an RFA export. Okay, so we'll do that now. I'm going to switch back into my master level of detail really quick. I keep wanting to say level of detail, but I'm going to switch back into my master model state. Okay. And just to quickly show you this process here, I'm just going to select one of these bins that I have here. And I'm going to open this. And as I mentioned, with this bin, I've already established a unique simplified model state called medium here. So I'll select that model state. What you see is that detail get removed from this model, because when you're providing these RFA families, an architect really just needs to take up the space, use it for coordination, or get an understanding of how much space it's taking up within a room where it's going to be placed in. Okay. What we'll go through now is we'll go through this environments tab here and we'll select BIM content. And then in this BIM content panel here, you see a couple different panels show up here. You have your MEP connectors, authoring, and then publishing. For this case here, I'm not going to go through the MEP connectors much, because this piece of wire basket does not have any connectors coming off it. It's not going to have any piping or ductwork mated to it from the Revit perspective. But I am going to want to go through my authoring building components here. You could define an orientation by the view cube or to utilize its model origin. But in this case, I want to use a view cube and I want to determine its insertion point here. So I'm just going to select this bottom corner right here. I could then also define an Omni class type number. So if you know the specific Revit category, you can select that here. And we'll just go with equipment and furnishing. Click OK. I can then fill out some metadata for this. So a description, we could call this wire basket. You could put in the manufacturer. So if you are a manufacturer of this, you could put in your company name. I'll just type in KETIV for this. A part number if you have that information, and even a direct URL. Okay. And there is some additional model properties here that you could also include. And again, if you haven't seen this before, I really recommend, we probably will have it after a link to the bio somewhere in this here to look back at that previous video that I did for this. And we'll click OK. Now that we've authored that portion, we'll just go into export the building component now, where you could then define where you want this file to be saved. You could also specify the file type you want to export to. So I want this to be an RFA family, and I'll click Save. Oh, I already have one there. Didn't realize. We'll call this just wire basket. Save. Okay. And we should get an export in progress. And what should happen is you should get a translation report that you can view to ensure that the export happened properly. So if you are having a bunch of, a lot of standard off-the-shelf items, you could start to publish these. Maybe you need to upload these to your website so that maybe you want your customers to be able to go through and locate the models that you do have and give them the ability to download these RFA files for coordination purposes or for their initial design intent. They can't get that directly from your website as long as you have all these files published. Okay, so there's that translation report. I'll skip that for now. And then what I'll do really quick, just to show you what it will look like from the Revit side of things, is if we go back into Revit here, I'm going to just close out of this current project that I'm in, and I'm going to open up that other exported Revit model that I created here. close out of this. And then I'll go open and we'll find that building model here and I'll open that one. Now what you should see here is, if you remember when I went inside of Inventor here, is I didn't turn off the visibility of the building in that export. So what you'll notice is that overall footprint of the building still exists within this export itself. It's not coming from the architect anymore now, because I included this within the export itself. So if you don't want the building, if you really truly just want to provide a coordination type model, that's where I recommend turning off the visibility of the building when you create that export. So now what I can do inside of this model here is now I could insert that Revit family that I created. So we'll go to insert, and then I'm going to load that family. And then we're going to find where I saved that family. And I saved it on my desktop to quickly find it. And it should be wired basket. And I'll click open. Okay. Now you're probably wondering, where is it at? How come it's not attached to your cursor? That's because inside of Revit, you'll create a family category. And then under that family category, I have it under the specialty equipment. I could then find my wired basket here. I can select it and then drag it and bring it into my model. And then any architect can then use these and then place them inside of their architectural model for coordination to define an area that they're going to be working within your specific industrial equipment or manufacturing equipment. Okay. And then that's all I had. That's all I had for today's demo. Hopefully that sheds some light. Hopefully that kind of closes the gap between maybe you are a company that truly does work between these two platforms, and you're designing factories and you're designing industrial equipment. You're kind of seeing this gap close between the two now, and you truly do have this bi-directional associativity happening between Inventor and Revit now. Okay, so we'll go back to the presentation really quick. And then actually, before I go into resources, so just quickly recap with 2022 now. Now we are having this associativity happening between Revit and Inventor. It's closing the loop now. It's closing that gap. You see this continuous life cycle happening between the two platforms. They both work off the common Revit coordinate system, and you are able to update coordinated models independently between the two and across the two as well. And if you are leveraging model states, it's just going to further amplify that simplification process for you. Okay. So we'll end up with some additional resources. As I did mention, Justin Chow did go through a little mini series of simplification. So he goes through the process of shrink wrap and configuring some of these shrink wrap parts. I would encourage you all to take a look at those. He goes really in depth with that process. So if you need an understanding of what envelopes do, or how to remove components by size when you're creating shrink wraps or some of these simplifications, I would take a look at those. I also did do a video previously in 2021, Revit plus Inventor interoperability too. So if you've never seen what the Revit AnyCAD function looks like inside of Inventor, I would encourage you to look at that video as well. All right. Now we'll end off with some questions and answers. So anyone have any questions or answers?
Right on, yeah. So feel free to submit any other questions you may have. We didn't really get any questions during the presentation here, but I will let people fill in some questions if they have any.
Does anyone find this useful? Can anyone see use for this within their company's needs? Have you struggled with coordination and providing coordination models at all? Internally or even externally with outside consultants? I'd be curious to hear, because we do have quite a bit of customers that Adam and myself kind of deal with on this, and we're seeing that this is truly a true benefit for them to be able to start leverage this.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting kind of overlap between like manufacturers and buildings and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that some people need to produce either RFAs or provide coordination models for architects and stuff like that is a bit beyond what you might just expect opening up Inventor, but it's all there already. And especially in 22, you can export RVT directly now, and you've been able to do the RFA family exports for a while too.
Great, Justin, I thank you for that. Justin's saying he found this useful. They create sunshades and louvers, so sunshades and louvers, so they could really see the benefit of having this coordination happening between their design intents. So that's great to hear. So hopefully this does start to kind of close a gap and introduce you to some new workflows that you maybe not aware of. And again, if you do have a collection, or if you do have multiple collections of the products, you could immediately start leveraging this right away. Oh, Kenneth had a question. I did see Kenneth did raise his hand. I'm glad he wrote it in the chat. His biggest problem is not being able to save down from 2022 and earlier versions. Kenneth, I think that's a problem for everyone that they're having. I do apologize for that. There's no, even in Inventor, there's no way to save down an Inventor file. And the same thing with Revit. There's no way to save down also. It's weird that AutoCAD has that. AutoCAD's always had that. I wish that
Yeah.
it's something that's always been incorporated into some of these platforms to be able to exchange design files. Because, I struggle with this with my experience too, is working with other outside consultants that just don't have the ability to upgrade and get the latest and greatest software. So sharing design files is a bit of a pain, and it does require them to upgrade to some of the newer versions.
Absolutely. And I think we also got a message here from Chris. Yeah, there was a hot fix in particular that went out that seems to have helped with some issues. I'll go ahead and repost this to the whole chat just in case you guys need it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, 2021.3 can open 2022 files.
Yeah.
But there isn't a save as. Yeah, I think we're all running into that no save as functionality, save down.
Yeah, that's a tough one for sure. And I know, like you've described to me before, Jeff, that building projects could go on for years, right? So they started in 2018, and it's like, well, we didn't even have 2022 when we started this project, so we can't really
Exactly.
move forward in the first place. But
And as many know, building projects do take quite a bit to manufacture. It probably is like a 2 to 3 year process. So by the time the initial project design was created, there's already new tool sets that are out that Autodesk has created. So even then, though, it is a benefit if you are an architectural firm, for instance, that initially designed inside, say, for example, 2018, you could immediately upgrade that model to 2022 and start leveraging this tool now. It just will take these other consultants to upgrade as well and have an understanding that, hey, we need to go to 2022 to start taking advantage of some of this.
yeah, and at the very least, hopefully these improvements themselves will help speed things along for that whole process. So
And I'm hoping this is just, if the more feedback we get from our customers, the more feedback that Autodesk does get, maybe we could see some of these workflows introduced to some other platforms. I hear quite a bit, I do have a lot of experience with plant theory. I hear this in the plant side of things, is not being able to bring in Revit models natively into that software. So even in Civil 3D or in any of these other design tools that you do leverage, hopefully Autodesk does address this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the potential. And they truly are trying to close a gap. Maybe it will take some point updates, or maybe it might take a future release to kind of see this happen.
sounds good, man. Yeah, thanks again for being on, Jeff. It's always a pleasure, and I have a lot of great like AEC experience and stuff to share with us all. So it's a good treat for everyone. And thank you for the audience members for attending and responding to us over here. Again, always a pleasure, if I do say so myself. I think I'm going to cut it there unless anyone has any last minute questions over here. Going once, going twice. All right. Okay. It's been a good week, everyone. I hope to see you guys again next week. We're going to be diving into iLogic and Excel spreadsheets with Christine Bonney. Also a fantastic session. So look forward to that.
That's going to be
Any
a great
last
one.
words? Yeah.
That's
Any?
That's everything. Again, if you have any question or anything, I would encourage you all to email our support team. They'll probably be able to ping me too as well. And then again, I would encourage you to take a look at some of those previous AVA topics that I did mention too, so you get a
Yeah.
further understanding of some of that too.
Yeah, I linked the YouTube channel in the chat over there. That's just for the first video about simplification, but you could access the rest of our videos from there as well. So yeah, again, thanks for being out here, everyone. Again, you'll be receiving a survey, so any feedback is much appreciated, such as if you want Jeff back to do more Revit topics, you'd be happy to, as long as the people want it. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.